Hey, what's going on, people? So this is something I've been wanting to discuss for ages, but seeing as it's quite a wide topic, I've been putting it off for a while, but no more. So I'm just going to go balls deep into this, and hope you join me in a non-sexual way. So where to start? Okay, right. Analyzing games in terms of how they perform and look is nothing new to the industry, right? It's been happening for years. It has always been prominent in PC circles, and how has always been prominent in console circles as well. But most notably for myself during the console wars of the 90s, between the Sega Mega Drive and Super Nintendo. Say for example, with versions of Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat being notable examples where two essentially different platforms get the same game, and people discuss which version is the best based on performance, appearance, controls, etc. But things felt different back then for me, mostly because back then, even though the differences were mentioned in magazines, etc., for most people, you played the version of the game on the console you owned, and you were damn happy that you had the game at all. Virtually, not caring if one version had slightly brighter colors or slightly steadier frame rate. Then we entered the 3D generations. New console manufacturers joined the fray, as we know, whilst old ones left, and consumer attitudes changed in many ways in the face of these new changes. And during all these changes, many new terminologies started to surface, most of which the average gamer wouldn't care less about or even understood what they were. Hell, I remember the only bit of tech speech I knew in regards to games back in the day was 8-bit, 16-bit, parallax scrolling, and mode 7. And even then, if you had asked me back then what they meant, for the most part, I probably couldn't tell you. I just knew what they applied to. So as time rolled on, tech speak became buzzwords, media ammunition, and selling jargon to empower the manufacturer, developer, and of course the games. And because of a combination of all these, plus more, we gamers also started to use these words vastly more than we used to before. To satisfy our own desires for whatever end. And in many ways, there was nothing wrong with this, of course. Getting educated, instead of remaining ignorant to such things has many benefits if you're constantly engaging such subjects, of course. But okay, I've waffled on enough in the start of this video, so I have a feeling this is going to be a long video, so I'll try my best to keep it brief. But I'm here to talk about the rise of the digital foundries of the world, especially Digital Foundry, their impact on the gaming world, and I want to discuss how I personally feel in regards to how their videos, and of course, like I said, they're not the only ones, but it's hard to argue that they are not the most prominent and impactful right now, but how their videos have affected player choices when considering a game purchase, and also how they're good, how they are good and bad points to the output. So where should I start? I think I'll focus in this video on around about 3 topics I feel that grab the most attention. So how about one of the big ones, just first then, the comparison videos of most notably multi-platform games releasing on multiple systems. And whilst we're here, let's just jump back into a slightly older but recent one, which is the release of Doom on the Nintendo Switch. Now I remember, before comparison videos were made, most people's first impressions were, I say comparison videos were made on Doom because we're using that as a subject. Most people's first impressions were, like holy nutballs, the Nintendo Switch is running Doom, a PS4 PC game, and it looks great. Then the comparison videos started rolling in, especially the Digital Foundry video, and that's when everyone started saying, hey, it actually looks much blurrier than I remember. All the details aren't as good as a PlayStation 4. This should not have come as a shock to anyone, because it's clear that the Switch is a fraction of the size of the PlayStation 4, and it was never going to compete head-on with it power-wise. I always use a PS4, but PC and Xbox One, etc. But you have to ask yourself, what happened in that moment of, say, the initial innocence, where people were really impressed to see the game at first on the Nintendo Switch, and then retract their statements somewhat when they saw the comparison videos. I said this before, and I say it again. We're in an era where games look great in general, and this is a fact. Hell, I feel we were there many generations ago, as I've said many times before. But that adds weight to why I feel people were so impressed with seeing Doom initially on the Switch. Not just because a game that of that graphical quality was running on a portable machine, but because Doom looks great. Full stop. But as soon as the comparison videos came out, many people got put off. Whether that was because of the so-called inferior graphics, frame rates, or resolutions because of these comparison videos. The funny thing is, with me being a PC gamer also, this is something the average PC player deals with every day. It's not the master race as people keep chirping on about. Not everyone can afford a top of the range PC to play high end games. So you find yourself adjusting the settings of the game to get it to run acceptable, playable on your PC. Whether this means weakening shadows, dropping resolutions, textures, capping frame rates, etc., etc. People are used to playing games in certain states, and not even the PS4 version of most games, of Xbox One version of most games, run and look as well as the high-end PC version. Something that, for the most part, sites like Digital Foundry use in comparison videos, in a sense saying that nearly every version of a game you play on consoles isn't running as the developers envisioned, so to speak. I've seen a negative impact of these comparison videos where people are put off because things get highlighted that can make a certain version of a game sound or look bad. And then there are also many things that you'll probably never notice, like a slight drop in frame rate when you're ass deep in combat and the screen has a ton of stuff going on, or slightly blurry textures on railings halfway down the corridor, which you probably never pay attention to anyway. But then there are positives in comparison videos as well. You can be given an idea of how much effort a developer has put into a multi-platform title that should run adequately for each platform is catered to, or you can see what has been changed, added or removed in each version, so you know that you have a complete package in the version that you have bought. Something that's certainly important in today's gaming world, where many companies like to remove certain features from certain games on certain platforms for whatever reasons. Comparison videos do irk me for the most part, and I certainly see more negatives in them than positives, mostly if a competent version of a game is put into a bad light against a more powerful console whose version runs more closely to, say, a high-end PC version or something. And in regards to Doom, it could certainly put a developer like Panic Button, who made a lot of effort with the Switch version of Doom, under pressure, and also make them feel like they've wasted their time when there's outroar and outcry that the game jitters every now and then and has blurry textures, But anyway, I think I'm done with comparisons for this section for the moment. We'll follow up quickly with frame rate analysis of games done by Digital Foundries and other websites, of course. Now, frame rates issues have and always will be something that the industry will simply have to come to terms with, because no matter how powerful the hardware is, if the developer is incapable of optimizing the game for whatever reasons, then most likely the frame rate will suffer, especially if a lot is going on for the hardware to deal with. Now, I was playing games when 3D first came along. I'm not even going to go into the pre 3D era, which frame rate issue wise was all over the place. But it was really the 3D era where frame rates became truly noticeable, I feel, especially during the N64, PS1 and Saturn eras, and obviously PC back then. I said this recently on the Juices Loose podcast. Shout out to my boys. Check them out. All their channels are linked on my channel, but like I said, most people who come here, I'm sure they know them anyway. I said that Perfect Dark on the N64 ran anywhere between 1 frame per second and 60 frames per second, and I experienced those moments in that game where it did indeed hit 1 frame per second, and it became near unplayable. But hell, I still completed that shit because Perfect Dark was off the hook, and we all know that. But it's obvious now that if a game with such a performance like Perfect Dark on the N64 released today, it would be for the most part unacceptable for the vast majority of gamers, and understandably so. But consoles are built differently now. Tools have improved, and such things should rarely, if at all, exist anymore. That level of performance, but I'm still irked when I see these comparison videos and people suddenly start moaning that a game is only running at 30 frames per second or dips occasionally into the mid-20s because of various conditions, but then the game balances it out again to around, say, 30 frames per second or that stable frame rate. I remember when Digital Foundry done that Mario Kart 8 Wii U video of the game in single player, where they highlighted that it drops from 60 frames per second to 59 frames per second occasionally. I don't think they even talked in that video, as far as I remember. I wanted to drop kick them out the window because they released a video where they were silent, yet clearly wanted to show the 1 frame per second drop, just because. The impact this had around the internet, by Crom. Like I've said before, there's where there's smoke, there's fire, and people use that single frame rate drop as an excuse to mock the game and Nintendo for not making it a solid 60 frames per second. Like that single drop ruined the entire game, or Nintendo were incapable of making 60 frames per second games, as some people like to use as ammunition. Which makes me laugh when you look at many other companies' output in the gaming world. For me, frame rate only becomes an issue if it's a constant, very low and noticeable drop that truly affects most of the playthrough of a title. Something that was an issue with a game like The Last Guardian on the PlayStation 4, which of my playthrough of that title, it was something that was an issue with the game, which struggled many times with its frame rate throughout most of the experience, and it did indeed affect my enjoyment and the title, amongst a variety of other things. Games that drop a few frame rates here and there really shouldn't be an issue for people, and it should in fact be accepted as commonplace throughout most of gaming for the far foreseeable future. When sites like Digital Foundry tell me that Doom on a Switch drops like to 25, 22 frames per second during heavy combat moments, and I see people put off by that, I'd like to see those people actually play the game and tell me that they truly notice such momentary things during all those explosions, etc. Because for the most part, I don't think people would notice too much. Sure, you would notice it, but not to the point where you're like, oh, holy crap, this is horrendous. Or as another example, you have Wolfenstein 2 on a Switch, where one level drops to the low 20s during certain parts, yet the rest of the game maintains a pretty good frame rate. Is that one level really that unacceptable? Once again, this isn't Perfect Dark 64 levels of unplayable. These are momentary, isolated moments that still remain fully playable, if a little irritating, for the short time, taking into consideration the length of most games today. I personally don't see the need for whole videos talking about frame rates unless the game is truly and really atrocious and your experience is really hampered for the most part of the playthrough. And as the early example, Mario Kart 8 didn't need such a video in my opinion, and caused unnecessary negativity against a very accomplished title. And of course, another negative factor to this is that Digital Foundry can fire out frame rate videos on games that aren't even complete or released yet, basing them off their trailers, or even game betas, or from sometimes off-screen footage. Game trailers is notorious for that. Not game trailers, sorry. Game Explain. Something I personally consider absolutely pointless, and as once again, the game isn't complete. So why bring up its frame rate at this point? It's just more ammunition for those whose voices can travel far on the internet and paint a negative impact on a game's technicalities before it's even launched. So those are just some of my thoughts on how I feel about frame rate analysis in videos. And lastly, let's talk about resolutions. Something that this generation has escalated in regards to the fascination, even more than the previous one, quite shockingly. Now, many might think, what harm can talking about resolutions in games bring? But you'd be surprised. Remember the Redout developer threatening legal action against Eurogamer when Eurogamer posted that somewhat negative video about Redout on the Xbox One X and the Xbox One running at a mere 1080p, which makes me laugh anyway, and I'll get into that in a minute. But also that the frame rate wasn't great, causing them headaches, etc. This video and article caused the Redout developer a whole load of grief from so-called fans who bombarded them nonsense, threatening a boycott and the usual hate-mongering. In this respect, Digital Foundries were wrong about their analysis, as clarified by the developer, and Eurogamer took down the initial video whilst releasing another one to correct their mistakes. It's these type of videos that can seriously cause the most damage, and as we know, once damage has been done, for many people their minds are already made up because they've already sided with one side. That happens to many of us. Getting into resolutions, it's hard not to think that sites like Eurogamer have become advertising venues, the push for 4K, no longer the push for 1080p, because supposedly we've moved on from that now, which I consider a joke, because the vast majority of developers still struggle to make games that run at 1080p and 60 frames per second. But over the course of the last few years, I've seen from sites like Eurogamer and most and others an almost shunning of games running at 1080p. Especially on the Nintendo Switch, where they many a times emphasize that in portable mode the game's only running at 720p. Sometimes I feel like once again I'm taking crazy pills, because for the most part games look great in portable mode on the Switch. Sometimes even better because the resolution looks tighter on a smaller screen. That happens. But but seriously, what's wrong with 1080p? Only a mere few years ago, 720p was the norm, and hardly anyone batted an eyelid, convinced that these games, for the most part, were in true HD. But now 4K and HDR are the buzzwords. We remember these sites pushing HDR like it was the next coming of Chrome, a game changer, the only way forwards, pushing this tech as hard as they could, but who's talking about HDR for the most part now? These sites that felt the need to emphasize that Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze was only running at 720p on a Wii U, like this changes anything to what is arguably the best 2D platformer ever made. Now don't get me wrong, we all love clean looking games. I've said this many times before, but when you have such influential sites focusing heavily on such aspects, this creates a different kind of mentality for many gamers who worry about these things first and foremost, instead of being excited about the actual game itself. Once again, this is evident with Doom and Wolfenstein 2 on the Switch recently, affecting its potential sales, initial and long-term reputation, and the same for the developers behind such titles. There are many other aspects, I could have focused on in this video, but I think this is enough for now, and perhaps I'll do a follow-up video after this one. But to finish up, let me just say, I see both good points and bad points in these videos that focus on technical performances, etc. We're in an age where games can be released on rushed piles of broken trash, evident with the likes of, say, Mass Effect Andromeda, and these videos upon the game's release give us a good indication on whether our money is going to the right people. I find things like this very useful, and if used in the right way, I'd like them to stay. But then there's also the negative aspects, like games being unfairly criticized before they are even complete, changing gamers' mindsets into expecting peak performance for every game, when in reality this will never ever be a thing. And this naturally leads onto many negative things that can affect the game's chances and also the developers' long-term plans. So, what are your thoughts on the digital foundries of the world? Do you see nothing but positive things out of such scrutinizing, content and videos? Are you like me, where you see both positives and negatives, or perhaps you outright hate them? Full stop for multiple reasons, etc. I hope I've given you a good idea about how I feel about such things. But as always, I look forward to your opinions in the comments section. And as always, I'll reply to every single one of you, unless of course you're the troll, which my response will depend on how creative you can be. But as always, thanks for watching all. Peace.